My wife secretly sold our family home for $350, $0 after I went to work, then tried to sue me for half because she claimed we agreed to split everything. Never mind, she forged my signature on the sale documents. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, trying to make sense of everything that's happened. It all started with a gut feeling that something was off, like a tiny pebble in my shoe I couldn't ignore. My wife Lisa had always been a bit flaky, but lately she'd become downright bitchy, snapping at me over small stuff and acting secretive. I'd ask her about her day and she'd brush me off, change the subject, or tell me I was overthinking. Still, I figured maybe she was stressed at work or just tired. Little did I know, the biggest betrayal was lurking right behind her fake smile. One afternoon, I decided to surprise her at work. I'd been working late a lot lately, so I thought I'd catch her during lunch. I parked outside her office building and watched as she walked out, talking on her phone. She looked nervous, her eyes darting around. That was strange, but I shrugged it off. I followed her to a nearby coffee shop, thinking maybe she was meeting a friend, but what I saw next made my stomach drop. She was with a guy, some guy I'd never seen before, and they were holding hands, whispering and laughing like teenagers. She leaned in for a kiss right there in broad daylight. I froze, watching from a distance. My mind spun. Who was this guy? How long had this been going on? I felt a rush of anger and heartbreak all at once. I wanted to storm in and yell at her, but I held back. Instead, I snapped a few photos on my phone, just enough to have proof. I couldn't believe it. My wife, the woman I'd trusted with everything, was cheating on me right under my nose. The betrayal burned deep. I kept watching as they kissed again, then she got into her car and drove off. I stayed behind, trembling, trying to process what I'd just seen. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene over and over, trying to convince myself I must be mistaken. But I was. The evidence was clear. I felt sick. When Lisa finally came home, she acted normal at first, throwing on her usual fake smile. But I couldn't keep it in anymore. I confronted her, showing her the photos I'd taken. Her face went pale for a second, then she started lying. Of course she did. She told me it was a misunderstanding, that the guy was just as she was helping with a project, and that I was overreacting. She called me paranoid, accused me of spying on her, and said I was imagining things. But I knew better. I saw her kiss him, felt her hands on him, heard her laugh with him. There was no denying it. The worst part was her attitude. She acted like she didn't care, like I was making a big deal out of nothing. She kept insisting she loved me, that it was just sex, that it didn't mean anything. But I knew her better than that. I saw the way she looked at him, the way she lied so effortlessly. It wasn't just a fling, it was a full-blown affair. And suddenly, everything we'd built felt like a house of cards ready to collapse. I was furious, heartbroken, and confused all at once. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind, so naive. All those years of trust thrown away like it was nothing. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of betrayal, and I didn't know how to come up for air. After I confronted Lisa that night, everything changed. Her fake innocence and denial only fueled my anger. I couldn't believe she'd lied so effortlessly, like she thought she could just sweep it under the rug. I remember staring at her, feeling this mix of rage and heartbreak boiling inside me. I wanted to scream, to shake her until she admitted everything. But I also knew I had to stay calm, at least for now. I needed to think, to plan my next move carefully. Because I wasn't just pissed, deep down, I was hurt in a way I never thought possible. The next few days were a blur. I kept replaying that scene in my head, trying to figure out how I hadn't seen it sooner. I'd always suspected something, but I never really had proof. Now I had not only proof, but also a clear image of her with this guy. Serious enough that she was willing to cheat on me, lie about it, and even try to gaslight me into doubting my own instincts. I felt like a fool for trusting her so blindly. She'd always been bitchy, yes, but I never thought she'd be capable of something this cold and calculated. I started digging into our finances. I needed to understand what I was up against. Turns out, Lisa had been secretly planning her escape for months. I found bank statements showing she'd been funneling money into secret accounts, probably to fund her new life. But the biggest shock came when I discovered she'd already sold the house, our family home, while I was at work without telling me. She sold it for $350, $0, and I had no idea. I found the documents in her email, forged my signature on the sale papers, and somehow she managed to do it all behind my back. I felt sick reading that. That house was our life, our memories, everything we built together. And she just handed it over to some stranger like it was nothing. What made it worse was her attempt to turn things around and sue me for half of the sale. She claimed we agreed to split everything, but she forged my signature on the sale documents, something I confirmed with a lawyer. That's outright fraud. I couldn't believe her audacity. She was lying about everything, trying to steal my share of the house, and meanwhile, she was out there screwing her lover and lying to my face. I started to see her for what she truly was, a manipulative, selfish bitch who'd do anything to get what she wanted, even if it meant destroying us. I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't let her get away with this, not just because of the money, but because of what she'd done to our marriage. I made a plan to fight back legally. I contacted a lawyer, filed a report for fraud, and prepared to take her to court. I wasn't just fighting over money. I was fighting for my dignity, my reputation, and whatever was left of the life I thought I had with her. It was clear she wasn't going to stop lying or trying to manipulate the situation. I had to be smarter, more strategic. I started gathering evidence, text messages, emails, witnesses who knew about her affair and her financial deceit. I did. Want to just confront her. I wanted to destroy her lies with facts. Meanwhile, I couldn't help but feel the emotional toll. I was furious, betrayed, feeling like a complete idiot for not seeing it sooner. I'd loved this woman, trusted her, and she turned around and stabbed me in the back. I kept asking myself how I missed the signs. Her secretive phone calls, her disappearing acts, her sudden hostility. It all added up now. She'd been planning her escape for months, and I was just too blind to see it. The pain hit me hard every time I thought about the house, the memories we shared, the future I'd imagined. It was like waking up from a nightmare, realizing everything I believed in was a lie. But here's the thing, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I decided I'd fight her every step of the way, not just for the money, but for my dignity. I knew she was a liar, a manipulator, and she'd do whatever it took to come out on top. But I also knew I had to keep my emotions in check. I couldn't let her see how much she'd hurt me. I'd be the calm, calculated husband who fights back with facts and legal muscle. That's what I told myself every day. I was going to make sure she paid for what she did, and I would come out of this stronger, whether with her or without her. The more I dug into her secrets, the angrier I got. I had to stay composed, but inside I was boiling over. Lisa kept trying to spin her lies, acting innocent, claiming she was the victim of my paranoia or that I was overreacting. She'd tell me she loved me, that she'd never cheat, that I was imagining things. But I knew better now. Her actions spoke louder than her words, and her actions screamed betrayal. The fact that she'd forged my signature on the sale of our house made me see how deep her deception went. She'd been planning this for months, probably longer. I started to realize she'd been manipulating my trust all along. She'd always been bitchy, yes, but I thought it was just her personality. Turns out she'd been hiding a whole different side, one that was selfish, ruthless, and completely self-absorbed. She lied about her feelings, about her loyalty, and about her intentions. The house sale was the final straw. I couldn't believe she'd sell our family home, our memories, just to fund her little affair and her escape plan. It was like she wanted to erase everything we'd built together. I knew I had to act fast. I reached out to a lawyer specializing in fraud and property disputes. We got the documents and confirmed she'd forged my signature. That was enough to block her from selling the house outright or claiming I'd agreed to it. I also filed a police report about the forgery. I wanted her to face consequences, not just for the betrayal but for her blatant criminal act. Meanwhile, I started gathering evidence of her affair, texts, emails, photos. I wanted to make sure I had everything in case this went to court. I wasn't just fighting for the house. I was fighting for my integrity and my future. I also discovered that Lisa had been secretly funneling money into a new bank account, probably her escape fund. She'd been withdrawing cash, hiding receipts, and lying about her expenses. I found receipts for hotel stays, gifts for her lover, and even a few explicit messages. It was sickening. I had to keep reminding myself that this wasn't just about money or a house. It was about betrayal on a level I'd never imagined. I trusted her with everything, and she'd been cheating on me behind my back, lying about it, and trying to steal everything I had. At the same time, I felt a strange mix of sadness and anger. I was devastated that the woman I married had turned into someone so cold and manipulative. I kept asking myself what I'd done wrong, but deep down, I knew this wasn't my fault. Lisa had chosen her new life over our marriage, over our family. Still, part of me felt broken. I'd always believed in loyalty and the vows we made. Now those vows seemed meaningless. I wondered how she could look me in the eye and lie so easily, knowing she'd betrayed everything we stood for. One night I sat alone in our house, now partially emptied out, and stared at the empty walls. It hit me hard that she'd already moved her stuff out, probably to some hotel or her lover's place. She'd been planning her escape for months, and I'd been too blind to it. I felt an overwhelming sense of loss, but also a strange sense of clarity. I realized I had to stop chasing her, stop trying to fix what was already broken. The only way forward was to fight her legally, protect what was mine, and start healing. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but I was determined not to let her win, not after everything she'd done. I'd make sure she paid for her lies, her treachery, and her betrayal, and somehow I'd find a way to move on from this mess. The legal battle was a nightmare, but I knew I had no choice. I hired a lawyer who specialized in property fraud and marital disputes. From the beginning, it was clear Lisa had been reckless, selling our house without my consent, forging my signature, and trying to claim half the proceeds. My lawyer confirmed what I already suspected. She'd committed a crime. The court documents showed her forged signature, and I had all the proof I needed to block her claim. But that wasn't the end of it. I also filed a police report for forgery and fraud, knowing she could face serious charges if the evidence held up. While the legal process dragged on, I kept digging into her financial activities. Turns out, Lisa had been squirreling away money into a secret account, probably to fund her new life with her lover. She'd been withdrawing cash, buying gift cards, and even paying for a hotel room for herself and her guy. I found receipts for late-night stays, expensive dinners, and lingerie, details that made my stomach churn. I couldn't believe she'd been sneaking around, lying to my face, and planning her escape all at once. I felt like a complete idiot for not catching on sooner. I also discovered she'd been trying to manipulate the situation. She sent me a few texts, acting innocent and pleading for another chance, claiming she still loved me and that it was just a mistake. But I saw through her. Her words were hollow, her lies obvious. She didn't want to fix things. She wanted to cover her ass and get what she could. Her accusations that I was paranoid or insecure only made me more furious. I knew she'd been lying to me from the start, and I had the proof now. The house sale, the forged signatures, the secret accounts, all of it painted a picture of a woman who was willing to do anything for her own benefit. The court hearings were tense. Lisa tried to argue that we had an understanding, that I'd agreed to split everything, but her forged signature blew that out of the water. The judge was clear. Forging someone's signature is a serious crime. My lawyer also presented the evidence of her secret bank accounts and her efforts to hide money. It was a brutal process, but I knew I was fighting for justice. Every day I saw her in court, I felt a mix of rage and sadness. Rage at her betrayal, sadness at the loss of what I thought was a life built on trust. Meanwhile, I started to piece my life back together. I moved out of the house into a small apartment nearby. I couldn't stand being in that empty shell anymore. Every corner reminded me of her, of what we'd lost. I spent nights reviewing all the evidence, preparing for the final court date. I knew she'd try to manipulate the situation, spin more lies, but I was ready. I'd gathered enough to prove her guilt, beyond a shadow of a doubt. I also made sure to keep my emotions in check. No matter how much I wanted to lash out, I stayed calm, focused on winning. The hardest part was accepting that I'd been betrayed so thoroughly. I'd always believed in honesty, loyalty, and commitment. But Lisa had thrown all that away for her own selfish reasons. Her bitchy attitude, her lies, her manipulations, they all painted a portrait of someone I no longer recognized. Still, I refused to let her destroy me. I was determined to fight for what was rightfully mine, and I was starting to see that I could survive this mess. I'd lost a lot, but I also gained clarity. I knew I'd never trust her again, and that was okay. I'd rebuild my life brick by brick and learn from the pain she'd caused. The court date finally arrived, and I felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. I knew this was the culmination of everything. I had all the evidence, the forged signatures, the bank receipts, the texts, and the emails. I sat there in the courtroom, trying to keep my nerves in check as Lisa sat across from me, her face a mask of false innocence. She kept insisting that we had an understanding about splitting everything, even though I had proof she forged my signature on the house sale documents. Her lawyer was trying to spin her story, claiming she was misled, manipulated, anything to save her from the consequences. But I wasn't buying it. I had laid out all the facts, and it was clear she'd been lying from the start. Her attempt to claim the house sale was a mistake or a misunderstanding was laughable now. The judge looked over the evidence meticulously, then asked Lisa directly if she had forged my signature. She hesitated for a moment, then finally admitted that she had, trying to justify it as a mistake made in a moment of desperation. That was the moment I knew I had her cornered. The judge didn't hold back. She ruled that Lisa had committed fraud, forged my signature, and illegally sold the house. She ordered her to pay back the $350, $0 plus interest, and dismissed her claim for half the proceeds. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Justice, at least in that moment, was being served. But the victory was bittersweet. I'd lost my home, my marriage, and trust in the woman I'd loved. All that was left now was the legal aftermath and the long road to healing. In the days that followed, I worked with my lawyer to finalize the court orders. Lisa was ordered to return the money, and her attempts to claim half of the house were thanks to the forged signatures. I also pressed charges for forgery and fraud. She was served with court papers, and I knew she'd face serious consequences if she didn't settle. I felt a strange sense of closure, knowing I'd fought for what was rightfully mine. But inside I was still hurting, angry at her betrayal, disappointed in myself for not seeing it sooner, and exhausted from the emotional. The aftermath was a whirlwind. I moved out of the apartment, sold some of the remaining furniture, and started rebuilding my life from scratch. I kept my distance from Lisa, knowing she was trying to manipulate her way back into my life, but I refused to let her. I realized that her lies and deceit had irreparably damaged what we once had. I also learned a lot about trust, how fragile it is and how quickly it can shatter when someone you love turns out to be a liar. Looking back, I see now that I was blind for so long. I ignored the signs, her secretive phone calls, her sudden bitchiness, the way she avoided my questions. I thought I knew her, but I was wrong. She turned out to be someone who'd do anything for her own benefit, even if it meant destroying our marriage and stealing everything we built. That realization hurts, but it also gives me clarity. I'll never let someone like her manipulate me again. I've learned that trusting blindly can lead to disaster, and that sometimes you have to fight tooth and nail just to get the truth out in the open. Now I'm focusing on myself. I've started therapy, rebuilding my confidence, and learning to trust again, slowly. I still have scars, but I won't let them define me. I want to warn others. Don't ignore the small red flags. Pay attention to the changes in behavior, the lies, the secrecy. Because if you don't, you might end up losing everything just like I did. But if you stand your ground, fight for what's right, and don't let betrayal go unchecked, there's hope for healing and moving on. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I'll be okay. I've survived this chaos, and I'll come out stronger on the other side. Now that the dust has settled, I spend a lot of time reflecting on everything I went through. Honestly, I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, telling a story about betrayal, fraud, and heartbreak. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. The biggest lesson I've learned is how important it is to pay attention to the signs, those little red flags that seem insignificant at first but add up over time. Lisa's bitchy attitude, her secretive behavior, The sudden changes in her schedule and her constant lying should have been warning signs. I was blinded by love, but now I see that sometimes love isn't enough. Getting through this ordeal has changed me. I used to trust blindly, but now I know that trust has to be earned, and sometimes it has to be earned again and again. I've become more cautious, more aware of the people around me, and more determined to protect myself from getting hurt again. I also realized how vital it is to stand up for yourself, especially when someone is trying to manipulate or steal from you. Lisa's biggest mistake was thinking she could get away with her lies and her fraud. She underestimated my resolve, my capacity to fight back, and my sense of justice. The financial fallout was tough, but it also forced me to be smarter about money. I've since learned to keep better track of my accounts, to question things more critically, and to never assume someone's intentions are good just because they say so. That's a hard lesson, but one I'm grateful for. It's made me more resilient and more prepared for whatever challenges come next. In the end, I realize that I'm stronger than I thought. I've survived betrayal, financial ruin, and emotional devastation. I've come out the other side with a clearer mind and a better understanding of what I want in life: trustworthy relationships, honesty, and respect. I don't hold any bitterness toward Lisa anymore. I just feel sorry for her. She threw away her integrity for fleeting pleasure, and now she's facing the consequences. I hope she learns from this, but honestly, I do care anymore. My focus is on rebuilding and moving forward. To anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, I'll say this: don't ignore the warning signs. Be vigilant, trust your instincts, and don't be afraid to fight for what's right. Sometimes you have to go through hell to get to the other side, but it's worth it. Life is too short to stay stuck in betrayal and lies. You owe it to yourself to seek the truth, stand your ground, and rebuild your life on honest foundations. That's what I plan to do. And even though I've lost a lot, I know I'm going to be okay. Because in the end, the only person who can truly protect you is yourself.